Now that we've had a look at lesson 2, it's time to have a look at practice 2. And practice 2 is actually the first practice within this course. We actually label them based on the lesson names. And again, in this practice, we've talked about some of the tools that we could use to process SQL, particularly to write and develop SQL and PLSQL statements. So this practice is focused on using SQL Developer and getting used to using it in our environments, doing some basic set on it, so we can do the later practices using SQL Developer. So to complete the practices, we need to go to your eKit and go to the activity guide in the eKit. And in these activity guides, we actually have them bookmarked per lesson. They actually allow for a practice per lesson, and they have one marked for lesson 1, but if you click on it, okay, on the bookmark, it will take you to the page. And I quite often like to adjust these so they're a little more readable, so I zoom in a bit, because my eyes aren't what they used to be. It makes them a little easier to read and that on the screen, and then we can just scroll around, reasonably readable. But if we scroll down to the next page, it says, well, there is no practice for 1. So the first real practice, as I mentioned, is the practice for lesson 2, Introduction to SQL Tuning, and it's really an introduction to using SQL Developer as a tool to write your SQL statements and to analyze the SQL statements. So when we do the practice, we give you an overview. We want you to become familiar with the basic functionality of SQL. If you've used it in the past, this will be a trivial 10 minutes exercise for you. If you haven't used it, it will take you about 20 minutes, half an hour, really depending on how much you explore with SQL Developer. In fact, you could spend hours and hours exploring with it. But I'm going to suggest you keep it about 20 minutes to a half an hour. Just look at some basics. As you use it during the rest of the course in some of the practices, you will gain more experience and see different areas. So we're certainly not going to look at every area. The first thing we want you to do is double click on the SQL Developer icon we have in the desktop to start it up. SQL Developer, starting in 11G of the database, now comes with the database software. When you install the database software, there is now a separate Oracle home for the SQL Developer. Okay, it's a separate subdirectory under the Oracle home for SQL Developer, and you can run it out of that directory directly. What we did is just put an icon just to make it easier so you could go and find it easily on the desktop and run it. And when it first starts up, I'm just going to shrink the student guide down to the desktop just to get it out of the way. And you'll find the icon on your desktop. On my screen, I've actually got a few more icons than you will find in a practice environment if you do the practices yourself, because this is an instructor's machine and it's set up to broadcast in one of our regular classrooms. So you don't have things like the stop and start and a few other things. In this one, we actually have the SQL Developers icon, and we've added that intentionally to make it easy. Double click on it quick. It's a little Java application. It takes it a moment or two to come up. It gives you this little splash screen, then it comes up. And it's kind of nice. They have a tip of the day that you can go through and look up a group of them. Okay, instead of just doing one, you can actually page through it and look up other texts. And it gives you hints on interesting things to do with SQL Developer. And they're actually quite good to look at, I found. When I'm actually working with it, I just don't want it in the way, so I can just exit out. The next time I bring it up, it will start it up again, and I can have a look at it. Okay. Also, there's an option if you just don't want to see those hints, is not to have it come up when it starts up automatically. And then you can go and run them as an extra tool to go see the hints of the days. And the screen for SQL Developer is broken into two parts, a main work area on the right-hand side and a menu area on the left-hand side. And in the menu area, we have two types of connections. This is a newer version that comes with 12c, the database. Okay, and it has regular connections and it has cloud connections. In this environment, we are using desktop machines that are usually run in a classroom, just reasonable sized desktop machines. Note, really production servers. And they're not using a cloud deployment, so we're going to use regular connections. And that's what we want you to use as part of this class. So now we're going to move back to the SGA and have a look at what they want us to do. Now that we've got SQL Developer up and running, their next task is we wanted to create a database connection. And we're going to create a group of these using different schemas. The first one we're going to create using the SH schema. And the box up here, it's a little spreadsheet, gives you the parameters you need to fill in and what the appropriate values we want filled in. We want the connection called sh_connection. In reality, you can call them anything you want on your systems. If you follow the practices the way we document them, if you're doing them yourself carefully, then later practices assumes the connections were taken up. You don't have to translate everything. It makes it easier for you to do later practices and that. The user on the database is SH. The password is the same. Not a good password, but easy for me to remember. The local host is set by default to localhost. You could put either an IP address or a real DNS name for a server, which most people will want to use. But local hosts work fine because the database and SQL Developer are running locally. And it means we don't have to have you take the time to figure out what the host name is for these particular nodes. The port number for the Oracle Network Listener, and the default port number is 1521. And the name of the system ID, in our case, it's systune, as one word, all lowercase. And be careful if you're a Windows person. The SIDs are case sensitive on Linux, so be careful. Where on Windows they're not, so it can be a little different for people. And then once we tell you how you're going to fill in the box, we need to talk about how to get there. So what we want you to do, right-click on the connection icon, okay, and it will give you allow you to create a little table of activities you can do with that icon. And one of them is create a new connection. The other way to do it is just press on the big green button above it. We'll show you that in a minute. Either way actually works technically. Okay. Then we have a little note to display the properties of newly created connections. Right click on the connection name, then click on property. And what it will basically do, give you the same box that we used as a wizard to fill in when we first created it. Okay, once you fill everything in for a particular connection, I suggest you test the password. They only let you type it once. So you're never sure if you got it typed in right. Test it, then save it. And then you can create more, or you can start using the first connection if you want. And we just walk through using it on the next slides. Okay, this is what the main screen looks like. Okay. After they did a right click on their connection or hit the plus sign, it will give you a little wizard where you can type in the connection name. It's blank by default. The account name, the password. Optionally, you can save it. Every time you use the connection, you don't need to enter the password. If you don't click this off every time you use it, you get to type the SH as the password when you use the SH connection. It's a convenient not to have to type it all the time, so I like making sure it's checked off. We're going to use basic connections. For most of them, there will be default as the role, except for one. When we create the sys connection, we're going to change that. Okay. Then we have the host name is preset for you. The port name is preset. Even the SID is set, but it's set to the wrong one. We'll see when I do it, it's actually set to XE, our free database. To go with the free development tool, and we also have a free middleware tool. It also understands using a service name, okay, for the database. And it understands advanced authentication techniques also. We're not going to use them. We're just going to keep it simple with the username, password. Test it. And if it's successful, you'll get the success keyword in the status. It should look like this. We highlighted it in red. Hit connect and you can actually connect to the new account. If you don't connect, then what you can do is update this to do the new connection, which is going to be the HR connection, without bringing up the wizard again. You can just go in and click on the connection again and do it. And then I can create a whole group of them really quickly. And that's what we want you to do, is create a group of them. We're going to create a HR connection, which is going to use HR as the username and the password. The rest is the same. We should test it and save it. Then we're going to get you to create another one called the OE connection, going to the order entry account. That's what the OE stands for. HR stands for human resources, sales history, and order entry. And set up a third connection. Then we get you to set up the special one. We're going to get you to set up one with SYS. And that's a wee bit different than the other ones. So it's got a different user. It's SYS, 3 digits, right, instead of 2. Wow. And the password is much longer. The password is actually Oracle _4U uppercase. Okay. And when you create it, if you're going to connect with SYS, you have to connect with SysDBA. If I leave it as default, when I go to authenticate it, it will give me an error message. It's easy to fix. Just pull down the SysDBA if you make a mistake. Okay, then we're going to create a last one. It is non-SYS. It's the infamous Scott Tiger account. It's going to be called the Scott account. And what we're going to do is use the username, the password of Tiger. The pass name is Scott, S-C-O-O-T-T, S-C-O-T-T, if I get it spelt right, and Tigger is his name. Okay, it was the original test account. And the reason why he had Tiger, it's actually supposed to be Tigger, because he had a little cat, which was a little tabby called Tiger. Scott was actually an early developer in Oracle. And he wrote the accounts that actually had the tables in it, the piece of the code that it used tables. So he had his own test tables. He has their engineers would borrow his account. And it's been a test account ever since the early days of Oracle. So let's go back and actually do this practice and show you how to do it. So I'm going to back up a couple slides. So we had left MySQL Developer where we were on. Now we've got to start creating the SYS tab. So it tells us down there that we want to run the wizard. So let's go have a look at that. I can pull up my SQL developer page. I guess I should make it full screen. It will just get rid of the distracting background in it. And then I'll regret later doing that if I have to move things around. Okay, we want to go to the non-cloud connections, and you can either hit this green plus, it will work, or you can right click, this is where they were set it, and hit the new. Both will get you the exact same place in the GUI. So this was their method. I'll do one like this, and I'll do one with the other way just to show you. The account we wanted to create first was SH, okay, underscore connection. Just to know this was the name of our connection. The account is SH. The password is SH. We should save it, okay. We have a little updating. Local is correct, 1521. We got to replace the XE with Systune. If I got it all correct, then I can test it. And if we get the success message, we're good to go. Okay, I can go in and save it. Now they wanted me to create another one. So after we do the SH account, we're going to do the order. They get you to connect, but I don't bother. The reason why is just easier. If you connect, you certainly can, and then you got to start the wizard again. And I get tired of starting. So let's do it their way first, and then I won't bother starting it. So I can connect with this account. And what it does is it changes the symbol to indicate I'm logged in now using this account. Okay. If I want to create another connection, because the next thing they tell me is to go and create a connection, I can either click on it again, or if I want to get the values in it, I can right click and do the properties, And then I don't have to do as much typing. I can borrow what I've already typed. So I could do this without saving it. Just to show you another way, if you want to type everything again, you can also do the plus, but now I got to fill everything in. I'm not taking advantage of the information from the original one. If I click on it, it will fill it in, so it's the same. They're just different paths in a GUI. It depends on what mood I'm in, which one I actually use in reality as I'm working. So the second one we wanted to create, just to remind us, myself, so we do it in the right order, is a HR connection. So it turns out once you get used to these, the information is similar. Change the connection name, the user and the password, test it. If I get success, if I make a mistake, I'm just adding an extra character to the password and do test, it will give me an error message. Username, password is invalid. All I have to do is correct it. I could just retype the whole thing in again, make sure it's incorrect, and then test it, and it will clear it out. The problem when you retest it is so fast, sometimes I don't notice it's writing the success again. It's one of the few places it's really, really fast for me, and sometimes that's a disadvantage. Save it, and then I want to create another one. The next one we want to create, and they show you the screenshot to fill in this one. And the next one after that is the order entry. So we're going to do the order entry piece. So we'll add that one. That one won't take too long. We start to get used to this after a while. And it gets pretty quick entering them. OE, OE, and OE. You get a little tired of typing the same three characters in a row. Test it. Save it. As long as I don't get an error message, safe is good. Just to show you another problem you may get, if I left it as XE or any other name, and I go to test it, it will say, doesn't know, listener doesn't know about the SID it's supposed to connect to. And the reason why, I'm picking a database it doesn't know about. We don't have an XE database in this environment. Put it back to sestune properly, test it again, and then I can save it. Okay. If I make a mistake and save it, I can always go back and edit my change again and make sure it's correct. And we have a couple of more we actually want you to create. So we did the order entry. The next one up is the special one that we have to change the role, the sys connection. So we'll have a look at that one. System. The username is that system, and now the password's a little differently. All lowercase Oracle, uppercase for you. You can't see it, but I used what they had in the book. A test will confirm that. And this is the error message you get when you don't pick sysdba or sysopera, and this only gives you the option for sysdba. Test it again, and we're good to go. So I also wanted to show you if you made another mistake, what it would look like. Okay, so and we should save that one so we can use it in the future. And we have one more we're going to create. Okay, we want to create the connection, and we want to use the Scott Tiger as a username password and then test it. And we should have showed you the screenshot for that. Now this one, they also do another change that they didn't mention. We're not going to use sysdba for this. We're going to use the default role, so we have to switch that also. And they didn't mention that in the slide. So take the one we already have, change it to Scott. Whoops, if I spell it right, it will be a lot better. The username is Scott, and the password is TIGER. Remove the sysdba, make it default. If I leave it on and test it, okay, it will give me an error message because this user doesn't have sysdba privilege. It treats it as an invalid username password. We'll just make sure it's not the password, it is the role. We'll test it again, and now I had the right password. So Tiger is the right password, or Tigger, I call him Tigger. Okay, so now we have our group of connections created, which was the first part of the practice. The second part is we wanted you to do a little bit of looking around with what you can see from within SQL Developer. And it's a very powerful tool. It's doing this all by entering the SQL statements for you, so it's going in. So what we want you to do is expand on the HR connection, or you can connect to it. Okay, so there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can either just do connect from here, pick the one you want to get it loaded, and then do the connect, and it will put it in. Or even if I didn't connect, you can actually right-click and disconnect. And then if you just expand it, it will automatically connect you because we put the password in. If you left the password off, it will prompt you for the password for the HR schema. Okay, and then it gives me a list. It's just querying the data dictionary to get information about the tables owned, the views, the indexes, the package, and on that are owned by this account. There may be a lot of this area, this account doesn't own anything. But for sure, we have some tables. We can expand the tables and get a list of the tables that belong to the HR account, really technically the HR schema, but there's a one-to-one relationship between them, so we can use them interchangeably. Okay, and we can go look at a particular table. In here, they have some suggestions. Okay, and I believe it's the employee table. They suggest you have a look. You can certainly look at others if you want. It will add a little bit of time to the practices, but it's actually quite interesting. Okay, to have a look at these. So we can click on the employees table. Okay, it takes it a moment to read the metadata, and it gives you lots of information. There are a group of sub-tabs underneath this connection. There's one for each connection, but this is the employees table we're looking at. So it says this is the employees table. Here's all the columns. These are the order they're defined on the table. These are their data types, whether they are nullable or not, whether they have default value, what order were they created in, which is the same as the first one in reality. And the comments, if anybody was nice enough to comment them. You can go and see if there are any constraints on these, and there is a group of constraints on the employees table. It will tell you the type of constraint, the option, search option if it needs a search option, who owns it, the related table name for the foreign key constraints, any delete rules if we have them, the status, whether they're enabled, whether they're deferrable or not, whether they're valid, and of course there's more information, so there's a slide bar to slide it over. A lot of these, they have more information. You can slide it back and forth to get additional information. Another interesting thing that will be useful for us is to look at the indexes. Okay, you can go find out all the indexes that are on a particular table and which column they are. Some are multi-column, some are single column indexes out there. And these will help out with our queries if we're using these columns as predicates in our queries. Okay, we said if you were doing bulk loads or you remove triggers or maybe disable them, it will show you what triggers you have. And it will show you the data for the tables. Okay, sometimes when I double click on things accidentally, I get that message. And what it will do is it's querying the whole table and showing me all the data. So we're giving you the row count. Each row in a result set is given a unique row number. So if I look at the bottom, there's 107 rows within this particular table. So we can glean a lot of information. And if we want, we can filter the data up at the top. So in the practice guide, they had a little note about that. You can use the SQL worksheet to select last name and salaries, I'm just reading point 10, of all the employees whose salaries are greater than 10,000. Okay, you use both of the execute F9 and the run F5 to execute them. So we can put in a query to do that, and you can actually execute it. I was just looking if they actually do it. Yep, here we go, the next page. So we're going to do this. When you do this, you need to run it within one of the worksheets on the connection. So display a worksheet by doing two things. Select under the Tools, SQL Worksheet, and open the worksheet. Or you can just go to the HR, and when you expand it, it will actually give you a worksheet. So there's actually already a worksheet out there. So I can take, the reason why we put this in this interesting square box, because you can cut and paste. From these screenshots, you can't cut and paste, so it just makes it easier to grab it. So I can go and put it in here. So I have a couple of connections. I can go back to this one, what we haven't used. Okay, I can paste it in. If I hit the, whoops, not what I wanted to do. I don't know how I did that. There we go. Paste it in. Okay, that's still not what I wanted. Somehow I got something else in my paste buffer. Not sure how I got that. It's probably because I got this open. So I'll get rid of it. Go back to the guide, select it again. Me and my wonderful fingers, Control V, put it in. Now there's two icons, and they are actually for two different purposes. This will run a single SQL statement. If you happen to have three of them in here testing different things, it will run one that you happen to have part of it highlighted. It doesn't matter which part is highlighted as long as one of it's highlighted. If you've got multiple lines in here and you want all of them to execute, as they're different SQL statements, two or three of them, you want all of them, hit the one that has the little text, looks like some text on a page, and run it. It says run the whole script file. Because there's only one thing in here, with one thing it's really a wash. You can do it either way. I'll do the first one because it's bigger icon, right? It wants to know which connection you run it in. You can just tell it the HR, which it defaulted to. And it will execute the query. And this is a subset of the data, only returned 15 rows, but we're looking for all the columns. They were talking about a subset, but their query didn't subset it. And then looking at a subset of rows, we're looking for people that make a big salary greater than $10,000. And we wanted to have a look at those. Is that 10,000? 1, 2, 3, yeah. They don't put commas in them, so I got to count the zeros to make sure it is. So that's what we wanted you to do here. Here, see those 15 rows. Okay. You can also press the 8.5 to execute it, or the run script. I did the other one. There were actually 3 ways you can do it. Some people get used to the F buttons and like to do it as a quick shortcut. Okay, some people just like to click on the icons on the GUI. 11G, in the same SQL worksheet, we want to create and execute a simple anonymous block output that says hello world. We talked about that in SQL+. You can do it in this. So first thing we need to do is set server output on. We do that to get the output from the dbms_output package. It's turned off by default in SQL Developer. So we need to go under Views to DBMS Output. Okay, select under the things we can view, DBMS Output, and then fill in some information. So let's go to the first part in the GUI. We want to execute it in here. We need to go to the View menu, go down under the View, and go find the Output. DBMS Output, took me a moment to find it. Okay, then what it's going to do is going to give me, when I click on it, give this Output tab. And we show that there. And we're okay with the default, the buffer size. We're just going to leave it for the little query, the little anonymous block we're going to write. That's more than big enough characters. We're just going to enable it by clicking on the plus. And it should say it's enabled the DBMS output. Okay. Another way of enabling it was the Control N key instead of hitting the plus button. They give you a couple of ways of doing it. Depend on whether you like to remember the shortcuts or like to do the GUI. So we take the easy one, click on it. When you hover over it, it shows you there's another way of doing it. Click on it. What session do we want to do it in? Okay, pick the session, and I believe we just picked the HR session. They should have showed us on the next one, just hit OK. And then we can enter our anonymous block. So instead of going back and forth, I'm just going to put this in the paste buffer now. Okay. And then we're going to get to run it as a script file. Because it's a multi-line script file, we'll run it as a script file. But we'll come back and see how they chose to run it. So hit OK. Replace what we have in the buffer in the worksheet with this. And then we'll see how they chose to run it. Okay. They're just using the run command. It's one PLSQL command. Just as long as you're over it, we can execute it. You can also do Control-Enter if you don't want to hit the menu item and run with the little green button. So let's do that. Execute it. Anonymous block is completed, and it shows you in the DBMS output, it said, "Hello world," which was a little message we put in the DBMS underscore output.put line. It was a cute little package we built because PLSQL doesn't have any output mechanism. They added it through the DBMS output mechanism. So let's go back to the practice. And that completes this practice.